Where would you put
Maybe Austria.
it? Oh, you're not too
That's
far off.
interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah, Germany,
Germany? Oh.
not too far off. The language is the same, more or less. The Austrian is slightly different dialect.
Yeah.
But have you been to Germany, Austria?
Yeah, I've not been to Austria, but I've been to Berlin.
You have been skiing?
Not skiing, unfortunately. I'd like to go skiing.
Okay.
Have you been? Skiing around there?
For skiing, that goes a long time back.
I think I'll probably fall over, but I'll try it out.
I remember my first lesson my dad gave me of standing there on the ski, and then I had to turn around, one leg here and then the other behind, and I got entangled, fell down, and I couldn't get up on my own anymore. That was a good lesson, first lesson.
Was that in the winter you go with your dad? Or?
Yes, it was as a small child.
Okay, guys, we're going to have a quick chat now. Thanks very much for Thomas for joining us at the 10-hour World Oceans Day newsroom with myself and Gerhard. So I'm going to turn the camera on Gerhard a little bit more now and have a chat with both of you, a little bit more informal. So Thomas, just tell us a little bit about your background and the sort of things that you're interested in.
Well, my background is from an archaeological background. I've always been interested in history and archaeology since when I was about 6 or 7, stumbled across Time Team. And then from then on, I've just always been fascinated with preserving things and going to my granddad's house, like seeing all of the antiques that you'd have, and he'd tell me stories about them. So it was from those I then went on and developed my own passion for history and archaeology, which I still have today.
Is that what you studied at university?
Yeah, my undergraduate was at Bangor University studying archaeology, and my master's was at the University of Leicester studying archaeology until recently.
So you just graduated?
Yeah, in January. Yeah. So
Right.
now out into the free world, which is great.
Now, one of the reasons you agreed to come and have a chat with us today for World Oceans Day is that we were talking about the impact of climate change, and we were talking about, ocean currents, and then we got into talking about wrecks, and then we spoke about things like salvage, but maybe not the sort of salvage that people see on the Discovery Channel.
Yeah.
More rich benefactors paying local people to go out and, with no thought of the damage to the reef or to the wreck, to reclaim stuff, and then things like oil leaking and stuff like that. So that's really where our conversation started, wasn't it, really?
Yeah.
So we then set you a challenge to go off and do some research and digging around. So what kind of things have you found? I mean, I know you're going to put all these resources up for us to have a look at afterwards, but...
well, digging around, no pun intended, discovered an awful lot in Malaysia, in Indonesia, and in the South China Sea. A lot of it is illegal salvaging, but also legal salvaging, because there's loopholes that people go through. Like in Malaysia, a wreck, if it's not over 100 years old, then it's not classed as cultural heritage, it's not protected. Even though in 2001, the UNESCO Convention for the Protection of Underwater Cultural Heritage puts everything under that umbrella, but some people disregard it, and they ignore any kind of official stance on protecting the wrecks. And the reason why the wrecks aren't protected at the moment is because people go out, large companies and the small fisherman that lives nearby, they go out into the open waters and salvage these wrecks. It's because the wrecks they have intrinsic value. So the steel that's in the wrecks, and also the artifacts that are within the wrecks themselves. And the steel that's in these wrecks is pre-1945, so before any kind of atomic pollution in the atmosphere that impacts the steel and the integrity of the steel. So it's worth a lot more money. So they go down and bring all of the steel up. And this steel is used in things like nuclear testing, and it can also detect radiation. because of the low background radiation in the steel, which is really fascinating.
So there is a demand for it, and I suppose
Huge
that's
demand,
what drives the market, and
Yeah.
also drives people that are probably quite vulnerable as
yeah.
well, because they're being exploited from that point of view, isn't it? And I suppose there's no consideration either for the damage that's done in the retrieval or removal of any of this.
No, like a lot of these wrecks, if they were left in situ, because it's been over like 75 years, they'd be fine and the oil wouldn't be seeping out of the wrecks. But it's when huge Chinese salvage companies, they have barges that go over the wrecks and they drop weights down onto these wrecks, and the weights smash up the ship, and then they use huge magnets to dredge it up, which isn't great. But from this, the oil leaks out of the ships, which otherwise would be contained, and you've also got explosive ordnance in the wrecks that is disturbed. Obviously, sometimes it blows up during these incidents.
So, if I understand right, these companies have absolutely no value, cannot put any value in the archaeological side of it. It's just really the raw material. It's not different as a thief who steals a manhole and sells it.
Exactly that. And a lot of, if a wreck doesn't have any human remains on board, then it's not classed as a war grave. And the problem is with a lot of the 500 or so wrecks that are in Indonesia, and there's thousands in the Pacific alone. A lot of these wrecks, the ones that are unknown, which is an awful lot of wrecks, and people just go along and they'll strip everything from these. So it obviously takes away the archaeological and cultural heritage of the site, and as well like desecrating human remains. But they're doing so because a lot of these people are desperate and they don't have. This is for like the small like local fishermen that go down with really primitive scuba diving gear, but it's the large corporate Chinese companies that do it on a huge scale. They're the ones that are causing a huge problem because they're doing it without any morals and just for the money. But you can understand why the local fishermen would go down and take things that just sees it as a resource that is untapped, and if it can feed your family, you probably would do so.
You said if there are no human remains on the ship, how do you know beforehand?
Exactly, that's the thing. You can't tell because human remains are entombed within the ship a lot of the times. Like with the HMS Perth, huge Australian ship. It was found in 1976, and in a survey in 2017, 18 to 90% of the wreck has been stripped, so 3,000 tons have just gone, and there's nothing left now, really.
How prolific is it? Wreck plundering on this scale. I mean, is it known, or is it more just an assumption?
It's huge scale. There's been lots of satellite imagery that's seen these ships like taking like dredging the ocean and taking the wrecks, and a lot of it kind of goes under the radar. So you get things like there's a ship called the HMS Repulse that was sunk alongside the HMS Prince of Wales, and they were fighting alongside each other, and they were attacked by the Japanese. And the Morse code from the HMS Repulse was found on sale in Sydney in an auction house, and rescued from being sold. So obviously they didn't know that was taken until that incident, and then they went to the wreck to research to see what damage had been done from salvaging, and it was quite bad.
Let me ask you maybe a stupid question. What makes this ship sink? Is it all from wartime, or is it
most of the
ships sinking? Yeah. We don't hear so many ships sinking.
Yeah, most of the ships that have the value of the pre-1945 low radiation within the steel. So most of them are World War II era ships. So you've got the Australian, British, and the Japanese fleets, like fighting. Because from the 8th of December in 1941 the Pearl Harbor was attacked on the 8th of December 1941. But on the midnight of that day, the Japanese attacked British Malaya, which brought the British into World War I as well, fighting in the Pacific. And it was from then that from 1941 to 1944 that there was just huge conflict in the Pacific, in that area. And these are all the ships that you find, ships that were sunk in battles.
When you mentioned South China Sea, huh?
Yeah.
But is the Chinese government sanction all of that?
A lot of it is them getting through loopholes and working with universities or trying to get research grants, and they'll say, oh, we're doing a research explanation of the ship, and they'll go out there and they say they're removing toxic materials, and it will just be plundering the wreck, unfortunately.
I mean, so it sounds almost like the Japanese doing whaling under the mantle of
Yeah.
scientific research.
Yeah, exactly like that. Yeah, unfortunately. So there's not really a way to prevent this because it's so prolific. You can't police the oceans and stop people from, like an archaeological site on land, say Stonehenge. You can monitor it and police the archaeological site, tell people about it, and because it's on land, it's easier to maintain the integrity of the site, but you can't really do that with underwater wrecks because each of the wrecks have sovereignty. So, say if an English wreck was sunk, the English sovereignty protects that wreck, and they have ownership of everything, of the wreck and everything in it. But whichever waters that ship is in impacts the ability to salvage it and protect it, which is a big issue.
So the ownership is with wherever the ship originated. The
Yeah.
ownership is not within which territory it is.
No, but then there's a whole issue of when oil leaks out of the ship, who pays for the damage caused to the reefs, who pays to the damage to the environment, because everyone likes money, no one likes to spend their own money, so they'll try and put the blame on someone else, or they'll just say, oh, I don't want to pay for the safety of the wreck or security of the wreck. Like even the Titanic at the moment, there's lots of companies trying to go down for research purposes to rescue artifacts from there, which obviously they have a huge value on, so they'll be sold, and it won't be good for the archaeological integrity of the site.
Can I ask you, have you been to any of this? Physically been to any of this?
I've not. No, I've been to lots of maritime museums, like in Liverpool. That's a great museum there. They have a section on the Kriegsmarine, German Navy, the British Navy. Even in Java, they found a German U-boat. There's hundreds of German U-boats that went missing during the war, and they don't know where they are. And they found one just off the coast of Java, and they don't know which U-boat it is because they haven't been able to identify it. But once it was found, within a year or so, it was found in 2013, it's already been salvaged, partly salvaged, which is a big issue. So I think it might be, once news spreads out that there is a wreck within the communities, rich people, companies come fishing along, and from that they go out and take anything from the wreck.
It just sounds like ancient Tomb Raiders.
Yeah, that's what it's like.
That's what I was going to say. The similarities between sort of archaeological digs and grave robbing, if you like, and particularly some of the stuff that we've seen in the Middle East with the conflicts and Syria and places like that. It's even harder in the ocean to police that, isn't it? Yeah. And what kind of reliance is there, say for example, like the South China Sea, which I should imagine with the Chinese activity with reclamation of land and building the islands, and there's so much tension with Taiwan and stuff. Must be one of the most overflown and photographed satellite image places on Earth. I suppose they don't really even bother with any of this because it's small fry compared to some of the bigger geopolitical issues. People are using that to their advantage.
Yeah, they're using with a lot of the political issues that are going on at the moment. Protecting World War II wreck sites that are in the middle of nowhere aren't really high priority for these local governments, so they put it to one side. And whilst they do that, people take advantage of it, especially at the moment. There was a news report, it was satellite footage of an area in South China Sea, and within a few square miles, it was at night, there were 6 or 7 ships dredging up in areas that had wrecks directly underneath it. So I don't know how, unfortunately, they were able to stop this.
But could that be not controlled? These ships have to go somewhere in some harbour.
Yeah,
Then it can be controlled. What is your load?
Once everything from the ship is salvaged, it goes to nearby scrapyards, and then from there it gets sold to China mainly, and then reused.
Where the ownership of its original or where it's come from, its origin is not really of interest to anybody.
No. And if you found a ship, you wouldn't think about its origin or the sovereignty of the ship. If you're trying to do something illegal and just reclaim everything from it, that's why a lot of it's done at night, and sometimes it can take weeks to actually salvage a whole wreck. And a problem is a lot of these wrecks, like 3 Japanese cargo ships that were sunk in 1944 by American torpedoes, they became huge tourism sites. So a lot of people would go there because the wrecks, they were like in pristine condition. They had coral reefs that were some of the finest in the area. And these wrecks have been salvaged, so the tourism industry in that area has been damaged because people can't visit the wrecks, and because that's one positive about these wrecks. It's a sad incident that happened, but you get to it increases the local economy with tourism. But when that's taken away, it's another big blow for the economy, and then people might turn to salvaging wrecks to get some more money.
Are you saying coral is populating the wrecks? Huh? What kind of time frame are we talking about?
Yeah, all of the wrecks in Indonesia and Pacific, they because they're so far down in most cases, because the ones that aren't very far down, they would have been stripped a long time ago. But these wrecks provide home for coral to form, and wildlife lives within the wrecks, and it forms like a natural bio zone within these wrecks. And the thing is, a lot of these the fishermen in these areas, they see these wrecks and the corals that form within them as a nuisance, because when you're fishing and you get your net stuck and it tears it, that's another cost for you, which you don't want. So maybe they don't care about the wrecks disappearing, because it make it easier for them to fish.
Well, we're talking a lot about these days about ocean protective zones.
Yeah.
I mean, if we would just have a protective zone in these areas, I mean, we're talking really about a huge space in the ocean as protected zone. Of course, the policing is again the same question, but if it's officially a protected zone where no ship actually can go.
Yeah, you could implement that, but even then, in the dead of night, people would still go into these zones. Like at the moment with archaeological sites on land, you can say, oh, you can't metal detect here, because metal detecting is wrong on many levels. But people in the dead of night will go into these sites, especially on Hadrian's Wall at the moment. They've had a lot of issues, so they'll go onto Hadrian's Wall and metal detect and cause loads of damage around the walls and take away artifacts that removes the removes the context of the artifact from the site, and they'll take it away. So even if you implement restrictions, so like an area of the sea that you can't actually go into, people will ignore it, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, if there is a will, a political will, ships are supposed to have some beacons on. Of course, they can switch them off. But what about satellites? Satellites can detect if there are any ships there.
Yeah.
Very, very clearly.
Yeah. I think if there was more of a political will, like you're saying, then it wouldn't be an issue. Like in America, like with the USS Arizona in Pearl Harbor, it's like a beacon for like national pride, but also like a museum, and protect all of that area is protected. So I think if the political will is there to protect the area, then it can be done, like with the USS Arizona, for example, which all the wrecks in Pearl Harbor, they have similar like abundance of coral life and animals that are like living sea life within inside the wrecks. So it can be done, but I think it's just money and power talks too much at the moment in the world, unfortunately.
I think one of the things that's most fascinating about it is that when you look at these things in isolation, so you're talking about wrecks being salvaged and sort of, plundered. We were talking earlier about Mission Blue with its hotspots, trying to create hotspots around the world. And then our very first conversation this morning on Skype to Australia was with Julian Cribb, who was talking about aquaculture, sort of, deep ocean farming. And it seems like a lot of these things could sort of, symbiotically all help each other. Because if you had somewhere that was a designated hotspot where you would then wouldn't be able to commercially fish, which would, they wouldn't catch their nets on the wrecks and ruin it. And at the same time, it would create an environment where all the sort of the nutrients and stuff. I did like the way that Julian described it as a 3D way of creating food cultivation. That maybe it's that kind of joined up thinking between some of these things as well. That an area like the South China Sea, not the whole thing, but an area of it where there were maybe undamaged wrecks at the moment, could be the perfect place to put an aquaculture deep ocean farm and create a hotspot at the same time.
Yeah, definitely. Like I was reading about the Secretariat of the Pacific Regional Environment Program, which is a group of islands in the Pacific. They're working alongside the University of Newcastle in New South Wales, and they're determining which of these wrecks are oil tankers, because they know that there's 300 oil tankers within the area that obviously pose a huge threat, and they're going down to these wrecks and determining which ones are more likely to evacuate oil from the hull. So they've got different methods, like going down to the ships and reinforcing the hulls, just to ensure that nothing comes out, and if any salvaging goes on, it'll be harder for them to break up the ship if it's got a reinforced hull, because a lot of these ships are rusting away. And they're working with scientists, archaeologists, and local people in an initiative to try and protect these sites. I think that's the best way that you can, just using lots of different groups of people to do so.
I mean, to me, it seems the only way of stopping that. It might be difficult from the archaeological point of view, but from the preservation, nature and preservation, coral reef preservation, there seems to be a lot of goodwill.
I think the way to preserve it is to highlight the fact that it's not just an archaeological site. It's like home to wildlife. The fact that if you damage these wrecks, the oil will seep out, damaging the environment further, and obviously if there are human remains in the wrecks, that's another aspect. Just like the sanctity of life from not desecrating what would be a graveyard.
Very interesting. Very, very interesting. You said earlier on, which I didn't quite understand, with steel before a certain point in time and the atomic. Can you explain a little bit more?
So steel that is made now, after 1945, when atomic energy started to become prevalent. Steel now has high background radiation, and because of that, it could be used for things like testing for radiation, or used in things like making nuclear weapons. But the steel before 1945 wasn't impacted by any of this background radiation, and therefore is worth a lot more. Because the only way you can get the steel is from something like a shipwreck, which is so far down that it hasn't been impacted by any of this post 1945 nuclear testing.
Are you saying the steel in our cars has background radiation?
Yeah, everything after 1945 has background radiation in it. The steel that doesn't is from these wrecks is used. It can be used for things like satellites, technology in space, and the way there's a huge demand for this, and the way they get that is by salvaging things like these wrecks. So,
is steel in itself particular absorbing background radiation? Or is that background radiation found in everything else?
Oh no, background radiation is found in everything. Yeah.
I always thought it was used for like scalpels and surgical instruments and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Which is why it was in such high demand and.
It's used for things like that as well in the medical fields.
Thomas, thank you very much for agreeing to talk to us.
No worries.
And doing your research.
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll put all those links up on the site for people to look at as well.
Yeah, perfect.